detectives. Your mission is to save this planet's ecology with your top hit records. That's all for now.
Yo, I'm just trying to make pimping my stuff a little bit more fun. So I have a YouTube channel, which is where you're probably watching this. That's Postmortem Video. I have a second channel called Grimstream. Not got the proper name yet, but if you search for it, you should find it. And if you're trying to stop sucking at the teat of YouTube, you can always head on over to BitChute and find me at Grim Jim.
Yes, Mr. President. The kids are on what? Well, that's terrible. Well, the Glams are on stage right now, and then they're off to a big Hollywood party. But as it's that important, of course, I'll tell them at once.
It'll probably come as a surprise to exactly none of you that for much of my misspent youth, I was a fan of metal. But I became a fan of rock, metal, alternative, industrial, goth, punk music at a time when the scene was very much in transition from the hair metal bands of the late 80s, well, all of the 80s, an unfortunate decade, into grunge and all its pretension, lack of stage show, and concentration back on the sort of almost punk fundamentals and so on. And it was quite unlikely, but also made sense that I'd get into metal. I was more into electronic music at the time. This was before rave really took off and the whole electronic dance music really took off. So by that I mean stuff like Kraftwerk or Jean-Michel Jarre, those kind of people. Then my dad had a bunch of punk records as well that I would listen to sometimes, and some rock bands, slightly off-kilter, slightly off-beat, like the Tubes and so on. But still, I ended up getting into metal and all of its attendant genres via Iron Maiden, who are older and cheesier, but they had a narrative, they had good art, they had story behind it. And while I rapidly fell out of love with Iron Maiden and got into heavier stuff like Slayer and so on, and then later into kind of industrial and other more experimental forms of metal, yeah, Maiden was my gateway in. And I had a lot of fun, a lot of gigs and so on. These days my music taste is a lot more eclectic, but my style is still Hobo Gandalf meets Disgusting Al Jorgensen, which is a roundabout way of saying that today we are reviewing Umlaut, Game of Metal, which unfortunately has a green cover, which is going to screw up the camera, but still. Umlaut is a GMless narrative game. Don't go away just yet, because this has the rare quality of being one that actually works. It's somewhat derived from Contenders and Eternal Contenders, which I've talked about before on the channel. Go back and look for that review. But it's more approachable and easier to play in much the same way that Dungeon World is more comprehensible, approachable, easier to play, easier to understand, and to play as a game rather than a meta-narrative to Apocalypse World. So it shares a sort of similar relationship. You play bands who are all part of the same scene. That could be a time period or a place or a style within metal. And you're competing against each other, kind of, over a period of play, which is typically about 3 hours, to see which band comes out on top, which one's the most famous, which one holds together, which one makes the most money, all those kind of things. But you don't have to play competitively, and it would be really easily adaptable to other forms of music. So you could, for example, use this to play a game of competing Korean boy bands or whatever else it might be that you might want to do. It contains a metal primer, though if you're getting this kind of game, you probably don't need that. All you really need is a deck of cards and a set of 4 extra cards, which you can photocopy or print out, which are to do with the style that you go for when you play a gig. You define your band through hope, ego, fan base, and cash. All of these start at 1, except cash, which starts at 0. So it's reckoned that you've made a start. You then choose performance traits for your band. These are technique, power, and stagecraft, and you get 7 points to spread amongst them, but you can't have less than 1 in any of them. So let's say I was creating a couple of bands. Cancelled is the first band, right? They have technique 3, power 3, stagecraft 1. Their rivals in the local scene, Atomic Deathfish, have technique 2, power 2, stagecraft 3. So bands are created within a concept. So Cancelled's concept is a sort of industrial metal art band, shall we say. You might want to define some of the band members. You should start with the lead singer and then bring out others. So our lead singer is Vince Velvet, a former punk who used to perform with the Vomits. They also named their drum machine, which is another member of their band, which is now called Resting Bitch Face. In play, you choose a scene, you resolve it, win or lose, either in competition with another player, in which case you're comparing your stats with each other, or with the world at large, in which case the player to your left takes the role of the world at large and is called your roadie in the terminology of the game. And then you reap the rewards or penalties of failure or success of whatever it is you're doing. Sometimes you're in conflict, sometimes you're not, sometimes it's just transactional, like spending money on something. So, for example, you pick a scene that you want to play. Cancelled is engaging in a fraught rehearsal with their new guitarist, Dank Mean, having mainlined too much Elon Musk on Twitter and afraid that the drum machine, Resting Bitch Face, has developed a malevolent machine intelligence. Mean is a bit off for the whole session. Today drums, tomorrow guitars, man. It's going to take everything over. So this turns out giving the band some ideas for a Terminator-esque style stage show to go with their music. But the time wasted in rehearsal means they lose 1 cash. So that's a transactional scene. You don't make any tests. -1 cash, +1 stagecraft. Sorted. Later, both Cancelled and Atomic Deathfish are supporting the headliners, Onomatopoeia, at a low-level shitty gig. Cancelled go for showboating for their style, which has a poetry rating of 4 and a shred rating of 4. Different styles have different ratings. Vince gets right in the audience's face. Dank goes for an angle grinder solo in the middle of their song, 3 robotic chickens locked inside a piano. Atomic Deathfish go for a solid, simple performance of their song Dum Dum Dum, right, which has a poetry 3 and shred 3 rating. You check for who gets the most attention from the crowd by drawing cards. Blacks are successes, reds are failures. In this case, for Cancelled, it's poetry plus technique. They draw 7 cards, get 3 successes. Atomic Deathfish draw poetry plus technique and get 4 successes. So they get more attention, which means they then go to the next section of this round. They draw cards to see how good an impression they make on the crowd. That's shred plus power. So that's 5 cards for them, and they get a single success, which gives them 1 point of glory. And whoever at the end of the gig has the most points of glory blows the other band off the stage and wins the gig and gets the most rewards. Though participating in any gig gets you some kind of reward. Each gig is done in 3 rounds. You can assume that's 3 songs or whatever. You can also choose to do an encore, and from that you get some more resources and increased capability. And then at the end of 3 hours of play, which is the standard, but you can change that, you can make it longer or shorter, you check to see which band at the end of the day is the happiest, which is the most famous, whatever other criteria you want, and then you as the player win. But the reward is the story you make up along the way, and it can get incredibly wild and wacky, or you can go for something more gritty and realistic. But it basically allows you to recreate the kind of drama that we used to read about in Kerrang, which we were all on tenterhooks for, you know, which band was falling out with which other band, which ones were splitting up, why, and so on, which ones were working together, collaborating, all of that kind of stuff. So you can play all of that out using Umlaut. Now what makes it distinctive to me is it's a GMless narrative game that I've played, which worked and which was a lot of fun. Most GMless games in my experience, don't work particularly well unless everyone is on exactly the same page, and that doesn't happen that often. And when you don't have someone to appeal to over an interpretation of the rules, that can create conflict, especially when you're in competition, which you kind of technically are in this game, but it is really about the story. But this is a GMless narrative game that I've played that works, and as such, I heartily recommend it. Style, it's not presented that well, but the game itself has a lot of style and coolness to it. I can't justify giving it more than a 3, however, for style. Substance, everything you need is there. There's also additions like band sheets and random band name generators. So Carnage Rain would be a thrash metal random name. So there's plenty there. So I'm going to give it a 4 for substance. It could have gone even bigger and introduced more substance, but it's not that necessary. So 4 is a good score. So that's 7 out of 10 or 3.5 out of 5. Slightly above average, a good fill-in game, or one when your GM is ill. It's also one that's suitable for forum play and things like that, but you'll need to bring in a neutral referee to do card draws and so on. But still, worth a look. Zang.
Tal, friend, and welcome to Gore. Savage and beautiful, John Norman's Gorean saga is brought to life in the Tales of Gore role-playing game and its companion world book, World of Gore. Take flight on a tarn, luxuriate in the bathhouses of Ar, pit your steel against the deadly Kuri, best your enemies and place them in your collar. Tales of Gore uses the D6 system, perfect for both new and old players. You can purchase it from Amazon, RPG Now, or Lulu.com. Ta Sada Gore.